And our thanks to our local candidates for joining us for tonight's Leaders Forum. As the voice of business for your Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce, we are pleased to co-host this session tonight along with Shift, Thunder Bay's young professional network. We'd also like to extend our thanks to the Business Solutions Group and Net Newsletter for live streaming tonight's event. And Shaw Media will also be taping tonight's event this coming Sunday until Tuesday, June 11th. So anybody that wasn't able to make it, feel free to share that with them and they can see it online or on Shaw Cable. We also offer our thanks to the support of the Fort William Historical Park, the Victoria Inn and Maverick Entertainment Group for hosting us this evening. The issues discussed here tonight affect business in our community, and it is important that you have the opportunity to hear the views of our candidates and their parties in order to make informed decisions on June 12th. We are pleased to welcome the candidates tonight of the Ontario Liberal Party, the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, and the Ontario New Democratic Party to participate in the forum this evening. On behalf of the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce, welcome our candidates, and I'd now like to call upon our moderator for this evening, Mr. David Sword, to begin the Northern Leaders Forum. Thank you.
Thank you all. There'll be each candidate from each riding will be given 1 minute, a 1 minute introductory opportunity, and at the end, a 2 minute closing. There'll be 6 questions that we have. It'll be the same questions for both ridings. Each candidate will get an opportunity for a 1 minute response. In each riding, the candidate that responds first will be given a 30-second response opportunity. The questions have been assembled by a collection of consultation with NAN, the Nisinabiaski Nation, NOMA, the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association, and a collection of chambers all across Northwestern Ontario. So, the Thunder Bay Atikokan riding, for an opening comment, let's begin with representing the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, Mr. Wilson. 1 minute, please.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Harold Wilson. I'm very pleased to be here. Pleased to be here with the crowd that I know so many of you here. My time with the Thunder Bay Chamber is still a very special one to me, as well as the chance to meet so many people here from Shift. One thing, though, some of you may not know is that I moved back here from Alberta just over 5 years ago. And so 5 years ago right now, I was the manager for trade and investment for all of Northern Ontario. So I've been recruited from Alberta, and it was my dream job over at Northern Development of Mines. Unfortunately, I found out after the first few months that my expertise in trade, investment, to be able to attract that, to make the economy go, to get more jobs, wasn't really what the emphasis was going to be. And it seemed to be more on the bureaucratic side, on filling in reports, on doing briefing notes instead of the actual work that we needed to do for jobs and investment. That's one of the reasons I went to the Chamber of Commerce, but it's because of that focus on trying to do better things for our area. That's why I'm your candidate today. So thank you very much. Looking forward to the questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Representing the Ontario Liberal Party, Mr. Mauro.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting tonight's events. I'm pleased to be here with Harold and the other candidates up on the stage. It is a business crowd, and I thought I would simply begin by reminding us all of where we've been and where we've come and where we can still go. We all know that we have come through the greatest recession since the Great Depression. We all know that 30 to 40 million people around the planet lost their job in 2008-9, and we know that Thunder Bay was similarly affected, and in fact we feel like we were affected even before the recession hit us with the demise or the strong decline in the forest industry. I'd like to believe that one of the reasons we've been able to come through this as strong as we have is the investments and decisions that we have made on behalf of you, our constituents. We've done a great job, I think, in coming through it. I can point to significant tax relief that we brought to the City of Thunder Bay, as well as major infrastructure announcements that I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about this evening that have positioned Thunder Bay's economy relatively well. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll turn to the riding of Thunder Bay Superior North, and we'll start with representing the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, Mr. Parks. 1 minute, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Derek Parks, and I'm the Thunder Bay Superior North Progressive Conservative candidate. I'd like to thank the Chamber for inviting me to be part of this forum. Jobs, energy, and healthcare are the concerns we are hearing from the people at the door. Progressive Conservative government will reduce red tape, energy costs, corporate and individual taxes. We will lower the cost of doing business in Ontario. We must recover those 300,000 manufacturing jobs we have lost over the past 10 years. We will do it through not providing corporate welfare. We will show Ontario is open for business. The mining and forest resource sector have been a major economic driver for Ontario. Ontario needs a productive government to get it back on track. We need affordable energy prices to bring companies back to the north. We will build and establish positive relationships between government, industry, and the Aboriginal communities to ensure everyone benefits from the resources that exist in Northern Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you. Representing the Ontario Liberal Party for Thunder Bay Superior North, Mr. Gravelle.
Thank you, David. Good evening, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this important discussion this evening related to business and the economy and the role the provincial government can and should play in stimulating the private sector as you work so hard to create jobs for the province. And may I say right off the top, since our party formed government in 2003, businesses, both small and medium, as well as our larger resource-based companies, have had a partner with our government, whether it's through grants and loans from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund or through the hundreds of millions of dollars invested in the forestry sector to restabilize the industry, or the Northern Industrial Energy Rate Program, which has significantly reduced energy costs in both the mining and forestry sectors. We've worked hard and closely with the private sector to provide the kind of incentives to help you grow. There's much to be excited about in Northwestern Ontario, discussions such as the Ring of Fire and other great projects, and I look forward to discussing those this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for Thunder Bay Superior North, representing the Ontario New Democratic Party, Mr. Foulds.
Good evening. Thank you very much to the Chamber and Shift for hosting tonight's debate. I'm running to be the next MPP for Thunder Bay Superior North because people are telling me it's time for change. It's time for a new vision. It's time to restore the trust and confidence. People are tired of scandals, bad decisions, and they are tired of a government that refuses to listen. I have 8 years of experience on City Council working hard for you. I have built a reputation to be honest and clear. You will always know where I stand. The NDP has a plan that makes sense for the North. We will start work immediately on the Ring of Fire. We will invest in transit for more jobs at Bombardier, and we will invest in frontline healthcare and education. The last 10 years have left people disappointed and frustrated. They want more, and they are ready for change. You deserve an MPP who has vision, energy, and integrity. You deserve an MPP who will be the voice of the North in the South, not the voice of the South in the North.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll begin our questions. The questions and who gets them first was determined, as were the statements, by luck of the draw. We'll begin, there'll be one question. It will be proposed to each riding. It'll be the same question, and we'll go across the table this way, but I'll explain as we go along. The first question would be for Thunder Bay Superior North, and through luck of the draw, it's to Mr. Parks, followed by Mr. Gravelle and then Mr. Foulds, with a 30-second response opportunity for Mr. Parks. Mr. Parks, starting with the question, energy supply. Could you please outline your party's specific plans to ensure the Northwest District has adequate energy supply to meet our current and future needs, in particular to fuel the economic growth that may be associated with mining and other development?
Thanks for the question. The Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario is proposing that we tap into the Manitoba hydro grid. Back in the late 90s, there's been on the books a line to bring power, cheap, affordable power from Manitoba into the Northwest and feed it down into Southern Ontario. That power supply would be sufficient to meet the growing needs of the mining sector. I mean, we look at New Gold in Fort Frances, and their concern is power. Power is required, charges about 30 to 35% of the cost for mining operations. So it's significant and needs to be really addressed, and we can see that in the departure. One of the reasons Cliffs isn't here is because they've weren't able to secure the power agreements they need, and that's on their website. They said there were critical agreements with the province of Ontario they weren't able to meet. Power would be one of them. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. To the same question, I could repeat it if you like, Mr. Gravelle, but it's on energy supply.
Thank you very much, David. We made the provision of energy an absolute priority for our government, and that's reflected in the long-term energy plan that was brought down actually in December. Certainly, some of the major priority projects reflect that. The east-west tie line, a transmission route between Thunder Bay and Dryden, making sure that we are providing the energy needs for the projects that are moving forward, particularly in the Red Lake and Pickle Lake area. We are proud of the fact that we closed the coal-fired plants in the province of Ontario at the same time, and my colleague Bill Mauro gets tons of credit for this. Fought very hard to see that the Atikokan plant was converted to biomass, and that the Thunder Bay generating station is being converted to advanced biomass. What we are absolutely committed to is making sure that the energy needs are met, as you would expect for somebody who was in the position that I was in, particularly as Minister of Northern Development and Mines, that we are keeping very close tabs on this, making sure that indeed the projects do move forward on time and meet the needs of the sector, particularly the mining and forestry sector.
Thank you, Mr. Gravelle. Mr. Foulds, to you, please.
Thank you for the question. Ladies and gentlemen, I have visited almost every community in the riding, and energy is top of mind for almost everyone that I talk to. And certainly jobs are also top of mind. And people out there are thirsting to work. Companies, many of the big companies that want to invest in Northwestern Ontario, want to have the confidence that they will have secure and reliable energy. And the reality is many of those companies, as one of my colleagues has just mentioned, has moved out. The opportunities for mining will have huge spin-offs for all of our communities and all of our small businesses. So the reality is we need to have reliable and secure energy for the future. In terms of Thunder Bay Generating Station, 15,000 tons is not enough. It will not produce enough energy for what the economic future holds for us. So we need to look at options to make sure that we have enough energy so companies have the confidence to invest in for jobs.
Thank you. In keeping with the format, Mr. Parks received the question first, so he'll be afforded a 30-second response time. Mr. Parks, for 30 seconds, please.
Thank you. Energy is critical. In the past 10 years, Ontario has gone from the lowest to the highest rated power in North America. Glencore in Timmins has shut down their operations and moved 630 jobs into Quebec just based on hydro alone. The power supply that's needed for Geraldton needs to be doubled. All that's on the books right now is enough for the town or the mill. They can't have both. We really need to address power in this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parks. Now, the same question will be proposed to the Thunder Bay Atikokan candidates, and through luck of the draw that we had, Mr. Wilson, to you first, please.
Thank you very much. Well, I thank Derek for a lot of the answers, so I will add on to that if I can. But one thing I will say is, as he says, Manitoba is going to be an important component of this, what we do with our energy needs. Also Minnesota, it's important that we're taking a look at actually selling power across when we can make money instead of giving it away, and also bringing power in when we actually need it. A couple of other items that I wanted to throw on here, though, is the issue about hydroelectric. Our party wants to see much more hydroelectricity. That's where we have great opportunity. A lot of the mines are going to be requiring energy to be able to go. The closer that we can have those energy sources to the mines, the better. That's how we're going to be able to make it not just affordable, but also be able to provide that power where we need it, when we need it, reliably. That's what the whole context is. We have to be able to do that. One of the other things we're going to do is to get rid of the Green Energy Act. All those things that have been adding costs and costs and costs, we need to reduce. I'll just talk to you briefly about a comment that was made to me in one of the what? Okay, you want me to yell? I'm losing time here. All right, one of the restaurants, if I may, on the highway said that, what am I supposed to do, start serving breakfast at noon or breakfast at midnight, because that's when my rates are cheaper? We can't do that for business. Business needs power at an affordable cost when they need it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Yeah. And now, for a 1-minute response, Mr. Mauro.
Energy, there's a variety of topics, but people are focusing rightly on cost a lot. I want to say to Mr. Parks' comment regarding Manitoba, the Liberals in the late 80s had an agreement with Manitoba actually to bring in 4 cents per kilowatt hour for 20 years, and it was canceled by the incoming NDP government in the early 1990s. The cost part is important, though, and you should know that at the same time we're concerned with it, but at the same time we're asking the government to make more investments. Michael mentioned to you about the east-west tie line, the Pickle Lake piece. In our long-term energy plan, we have significant investments already booked that we're committed to that are going to bring increased transmission into the area, electricity into the area, and increased security into the area for the very mining industries that we're hoping to secure. We know that that is going to come, but it costs money. The east-west tie line alone is $600 million to $1 billion. So while we're talking about cost, we need to be aware that at the same time, we're still asking our government to spend more, including the $200 million almost that we spent to convert both the coal plants in my riding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mauro. And Mr. Wilson, you're afforded a 30-second response time for, wait till the clock starts there.
Well, as I've said many times in this campaign, there's a difference between an announcement and actually seeing it happen. I was also at an announcement, I think it was about 3.5, maybe almost 4 years ago, which was about the major line coming through from Kenora all the way here. Then that didn't happen. All of a sudden when they had the Ontario Hydro was here, I'm taking a look, it's not even on their charts. So I mean, things get announced and then they don't happen. We're looking at the east-west tie line. We all know that's not going to happen in 2018. Who knows when it's going to actually happen on its way through.
Thank you. In keeping then with the agreed upon format, we'll stick with the Thunder Bay Atikokan riding, and we'll begin with a question to you, Mr. Mauro. The Ring of Fire is an enormous mineral deposit approximately 300 kilometers north of Nakina. It holds tremendous promise. What could you and your party do to make sure that this promise is realized for the region and for the province?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm sure my colleague Michael Gravelle is wishing that he'd gotten this one first. He spent a lot of time working on this file. There have been a couple of very significant announcements in the last short period of time, I would suggest. Many people will be aware of the Memorandum of Understanding, the agreement that was signed with the 9-member Matawa First Nations communities. Many of us see that as critical and necessary to laying the groundwork so that we can in fact go forward on a broader basis with helping to get that mine started up there. As well as many people are aware, there was $1 billion allocated in our provincial budget for the Ring of Fire infrastructure. As has been mentioned by many people, I think people understand it is an incredibly complex project. It is 3 to 350 kilometers from the nearest infrastructure, from the nearest energy generation. It is difficult, and it is very difficult to get it all done. We have multiple and competing energy companies as well. A very complex project. We feel like we have made progress. I know everybody's anxious and looking to get this started, as are we.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, the same question, please, about the Ring of Fire.
And like everybody else up here, 1 minute won't cut it. So, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about planning. I mean, that's really all that's happened so far is planning, and sometimes that planning takes a really long time. I know that they're going to talk about the work that was done by Justice Yabuchi as well as Bob Ray, but again, that was years too late. I mean, when they first announced the Ring of Fire, that's when I was at a meeting 3 years ago about infrastructure, and everybody was saying, okay, what are we doing about infrastructure? The First Nations were there, the companies were there, the province wasn't. No deputy ministers, no ministers of finance, of natural resources, Ministry of Environment, the Premier's office, all those ones that are needed to make this thing actually go. And the people from the private sector says, without the province there trying to help to facilitate this, it's not going to happen. The Far North Act is going to do more against ever seeing the Ring of Fire happen than you would believe. Because again, the protections are such, they're east-west, and all the development will be north-south. The last thing is we have a lot of mines that don't need the Ring of Fire infrastructure. They're not moving ahead either. That's a huge issue.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. In keeping with response, you get a 30-second response, Mr. Mauro.
Well, in regard to the reference to the Far North Act, in fact, much of the work that has been done on that legislation has helped to lay the groundwork for future economic development in a variety of communities in Northern Ontario. We're very proud of that work. But I must say, I always find it a little bit interesting when I hear people from the Conservative Party suggesting that we need more government involvement and more government intervention and not focusing as much on the private sector. We know there's competing interests there. It's not as simple as we would all like it to be. We're doing our best to move it forward, and we think we've made great progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mauro. Now we'll turn the same question over to the riding of Thunder Bay Superior North and call upon Mr. Gravelle for a response, a 1-minute response to the question regarding the potential of the Ring of Fire and how best.
Thanks, David. The fact is that we are now truly poised to move forward with the Ring of Fire. The agreement, the framework agreement that we put in place with the Mattawa First Nation was vital. We always speak about getting it right. People who are critical often say we're not moving fast enough. This was an absolutely vital element, and putting that in place was crucial. Next step was to be able to get the $1 billion investment. We certainly are going to go ahead with that $1 billion investment in terms of the transportation corridor, regardless of whether the federal government comes to the table or not. Although in order for us to complete this project in the way we should, in terms of providing community access, we need to have the federal government on board. What's really, I think, positive and needs to be understood is that the industry now is coming back to the table as well. We've set up a development corporation. They have seen all the companies involved, the First Nations and our other partners, that indeed with that $1 billion investment, commitment to move the transportation infrastructure forward, the work we're doing with the First Nations and the continued work we'll be doing, this project is ready to move forward. It's unfortunate that the NDP chose to not support our budget and stop the project.
Thank you, Mr. Gravelle. Speaking of the NDP, Mr. Foulds, please.
Thanks for the question. I think the reality is many people have pinned their hopes on the Ring of Fire in terms of its job creation. I credit Mr. Wilson for mentioning all the other mines and the potential economic development with that. I think the reality is if this current government was serious about mining development, these kinds of things would have happened years ago. If they were serious, they would have done it before Cliffs had pulled out. If they were serious, they would have made announcements long ago, not a week before a potential election, and then they wouldn't have changed the announcement during the election. So what do we need to do? We need to get serious about infrastructure and the right kind of infrastructure. And we also need to be thoughtful and strategic. That infrastructure should not only have economic benefit, but it needs to have benefit for the communities in the north. And if there are opportunities for broader public good with that investment of infrastructure, we need to take advantage of that. So industry, communities, First Nations, and the environment all need to benefit from immediate investment in the Ring of Fire.
Thank you. Mr. Parks, please, 1 minute.
Thanks. Ring of Fire is an amazing opportunity that's at our footsteps. I had the privilege of working for the junior that was purchased by Cliffs, and I actually introduced a Fortune 500 company to the gentleman to my left. I was 35, pretty honored about the potential of those jobs, and the comments I hear back from industry of what's gone on in the province is horrible. They pulled out, they felt they were held hostage and thought, we can't deal here. There's people that have left the industry and the company and feel it's going to be 10 years before this is up and running. As a consultant, my job is to manage expectations, and when I hear that, I think the people of Thunder Bay, Superior North, and Northwestern Ontario need to hear what industry's saying. The fatal flaw with what's gone on in the negotiations between the 9 First Nation communities in the province is the industry's not there. Stuff may be committed to and industry may not be there. The government doesn't build mines. Industry and not having there up front holds a major Achilles heel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. And in keeping with the format, Mr. Gravelle, 30 seconds.
It was absolutely vital that the First Nations were ensured that they would be getting benefits in this project, and that includes issues such as resource revenue sharing, regional infrastructure. All the companies recognize how important that is, I say to both Derek and Andrew. And in many ways, Andrew, I don't think you and I are disagreeing that much. Clearly, this was a vital part of it. The Mattawa First Nations asked us to sit down with them. We began those negotiations. We had an extraordinary process. And then we were able to move forward with the $1 billion commitment. And it's now vital indeed that we pull all the partners together, and we are poised to move forward. We are in a very different place as a result of the hard work that was done by Mr. Ray, Mr. Iacobucci, and the others. So now is our opportunity to move ahead, and I certainly hope I get the opportunity to make that happen.
Thank you. We will actually stick with the Thunder Bay Superior North riding on this, and we'll start with the format of beginning with Mr. Foulds, then with Mr. Parks, and then Mr. Gravelle. Mr. Foulds, the Ontario Provincial Police Small and rural municipalities are responsible for the same legislative and reporting requirements as our larger communities, but they feel they do not have the resources to deal with the increased demands mandated by the province regarding police and law protection. What would your party agree to take back responsibility for policing for small municipalities with a population of 5,000 or less?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I'd like to pull on some of my municipal experience, because as a city councillor, every year, of course, we're looking at our budgets, and certainly emergency services is a very serious issue, not just for small communities. It's a serious issue for large communities. Of course, I recognize the employment that emergency services provide. I certainly recognize the service it provides to the communities. In the leaders' debate last week, there was a recognition by Andrea Horvath that we have a serious issue on our hands, where smaller communities simply do not have the revenue that they need to continue to provide some of the services. I've been visiting some First Nations communities that actually have stopped policing altogether, and they're only receiving OPP in emergency situations. So the situation is very critical. I can't commit to anything at this point in time, but what I can commit to is that there needs to be a discussion, there needs to be an open dialogue on how we can problem solve some of these smaller communities and their challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Foulds. Mr. Parks, for 1 minute.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's a major issue. The finances are stretching emergency services everywhere. Even with some of the questions we had from the Wawate News, it was one of their concerns about emergency responses. I think the province has a role to play in ensuring the health and safety and protection of all residents. And if the municipalities are getting squeezed for those funds, the province will have to look at how we support those services. They have to be there, they have to be provided, and it's not fair to download it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then in keeping with our format, Mr. Foulds, 30. Oh, no. I'm sorry, Mr. Gravelle. My apologies.
David, come
My
on.
apologies. 1 minute.
Actually, let me begin by referencing something that happened this morning. Premier Wynne actually had a meeting this morning with a number of municipal leaders all across the province, which included the president of NOMA, Dave Canfield, and the president of Phenom, Alan Spacek. And one of the issues that actually was discussed was the fact that this is the whole issue of policing and the challenges that it has in terms of costs in particular was measured. And we've been working very, very hard with our municipal leaders. And I think that speaks to the fact that the relationship between the municipalities and the province is so darn important. And I'm also very conscious, again, representing Thunder Bay Superior North, a community that obviously represents the top half of Thunder Bay, and then the rest of them, 12 other small communities. Those challenges are really there. So this is really about the kind of consultation, the kind of discussions we need to have to recognize that that's one of the challenges facing smaller municipalities. There are many others as well. And I think it's fair to say, I believe it's very fair to say that our government has built up a very, very close relationship with the municipal leaders and going to continue to do so if we're lucky enough to be reelected.
Thank you, Mr. Gravelle. Mr. Foulds, for 30 seconds for a response, please.
Thank you. I guess what I'd like to finish with is simply all municipalities are struggling with their budgets right now. And the reality is the property taxation system has limited opportunities for revenue. And so whether it's policing or any other municipal service, municipalities are getting squeezed, and one of the aspects is emergency services, so they're going to have to decrease other services. So the reality is we need to make sure that we take a look at the impact system. We need to, province needs to consult with municipalities and problem solve some of these challenges so that municipalities have the revenue that they need to provide the services that their citizens demand.
Thank you. The same question will be posed to Thunder Bay Atikokan, and just to be clear, it's for municipalities with a population of 5,000 or less. Would your party be willing to have to accept that responsibility? And I begin with Mr. Wilson for 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. I think the point that Michael Gravelle made is an important one, is about the relationship between the small municipalities and the province. It is a very important one. Right now that relationship is strained. And it's been strained a lot because of certain costs that the municipalities have had to pick up and not able to bring in new sources of revenue. So that's really what's caused this strain. So when they take a look at the issue of policing, it's not so much who's going to pay as the issue, it's how much they have to pay. There are certain things that are being mandated on the municipalities. I've talked to a number of mayors about this. They're taking a look at what the appropriate amount of policing that they need, what the appropriate amount of costs that they're going to have to pass on to their ratepayers, to their taxpayers. What's being mandated is something either in excess of it or having no say in the appropriate level of policing that they have. That's really what the issue is. They need to be able to have much more of a say in it, have more flexibility, put what's appropriate to their ratepayers, because otherwise those costs are going up and they're expected to go up extremely high in the next little while. And it is causing a lot of concern amongst those municipalities and their mayors.
Thank you. Mr. Mauro.
Well, there's a difference between mandating and downloading. Derek mentioned downloading. The fact is, Derek, that those municipalities that we're discussing here right now became responsible for these costs in the late 1990s under a previous government, and you can figure out which one that was. There is a review going on right now that is trying to address this issue as best we can. We're not doing it to the municipalities. The municipalities asked us to do it because there are some municipalities that pay as little as $90 a month for OPP policing, and there are some municipalities in Northern Ontario that are paying as much as $1,000 a month for their OPP policing. We were asked to do this. We're reviewing it. Since being appointed Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, I've already had meetings with the minister responsible for this, Community Safety and Correctional Services, and in that debate that was referenced by Andrew, I would say that you would have heard the Premier in that debate also say that she is considering mitigation funding as part of this review for those municipalities who would potentially see increases in their OPP funding costs.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, a 30-second response, please.
I think I heard something about that meeting from some of the municipalities that were there, and they weren't happy. There was certainly no talk about trying to help their needs. And usually at the time, if we're going to be changing costs, we're not changing them downwards. I don't think anybody's expecting that. Probably it's going to be how we're going to increase them all to everybody else. Again, one of those issues, though, is about how those municipalities are going to be able to generate more revenue. Right now, the Ministry of Natural Resources is one of those biggest things that is keeping those municipalities from growing, attracting more residents, taking on new developments. This is trying to put money into the coffers. The government is doing such a good job on giving them costs, but they're not helping them at all to be able to raise revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We're gonna keep with the riding of Thunder Bay Atikokan, and again, this question will be posed to the riding following the responses from here, and we'll begin with Mr. Mauro. Ontario's deficit and debt, according to the Ministry of Finance figures, the deficit stands at $12.5 billion, and the debt approaching $300 billion. What would your party's plans be to reduce both? For 1 minute.
Well, the deficit is clearly a very serious situation, and it's one that we all take seriously. I would say there's very little difference in the positions of the three parties in terms of the timeline for getting there. Our timeline for coming at the balance is 2017, 2018. I believe the NDP position is the same, and I believe the Conservatives are 1 year sooner. The Premier has discussed very clearly about wage restraint. We're not talking wage freeze. It's a different language than the Conservatives are using, because quite frankly, you can't just freeze wages. You have to freely collective bargain. That is essential. It's fundamental. You can't just say you're freezing wages without a collective bargaining process, or you'll find yourself in a great big deal of trouble. But we are talking about wage restraint as part of it. We absolutely feel there will be growth in the economy. That will be one pillar of helping to get us back in balance. And the third part, I would say, is that we are looking for some help. It's not contingent on us reaching balance, but it would be the other members up here would not have made. But just think of the investments that have come into our riding, and which of those would you have liked us not to have made? I'm the MPP for Thunder Bay Atikokan. I want to bring investment and supports to this community.
It's greater than all the other provinces combined. So we've got a real problem. We're standing on railway tracks, looking down at our feet, and there's a train coming. We either deal with this now, or when we do it in 4 years in the next election, but we've got some serious decisions and cuts that have to be made. And we're trying to be realistic and not say we're not going to have cuts. They're coming. So we have to be prepared for that, and we have to tackle the deficit. It's not fair to our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Gravelle?
Well, I think in many ways this might be the defining issue of the election, in the sense of looking at certainly the two main parties, the Liberals and Conservatives. I mean, we have the deficit obviously is huge, and we have a 3-year balanced, responsible plan to get back to balance. And what we have on the other hand is a Conservative Party plan that is about basically slashing 100,000 jobs. It's about an absolutely discredited jobs plan. It's about really bringing the province back into a situation where indeed there'll be no real investments made. We are bringing forward an absolutely balanced, responsible plan that includes job creation, that includes infrastructure development, that includes bringing the economy forward in I think the fashion that will work while we put restraints in place, much of what we've actually implemented with the Drummond report. So it is about making a decision about which party you feel, in the case of the two parties certainly, is the best one to move the plan forward. We feel very committed to our plan, and as Bill Mauro said, we've made some very significant investments which have improved the economy in Thunder Bay and Northwestern Ontario in a very significant way, and we're proud of them.
Thank you. Mr. Foulds?
Well, I guess I would start by saying, when it comes to issues like this, I think you need to just take a look at what's happened over the last number of years. With respect to what happened in 2008, that's fine. But over the last number of years, we've seen some very strategic decisions that have cost taxpayers a lot of money, whether it's the cancellation of gas plants, whether it's e-health, whether it's today the issues with Mars. So, I mean, we need to be more accountable. We have to be more transparent. And we have to regain your trust. We need to regain your trust so that every single public dollar is precious. So I think the accountability is very key. So our leader is planning two very strategic directions. One, we're going to open the Office of Accountability immediately. It was a promise made in the last budget. It still is empty. And we also have a ministry that we would like to increase financial accountability. We want to eliminate waste, and we want to push out 0.5% savings year after year, which equates to about $600 million. So we also want to target eliminating the deficit in 2017-18.
Thank you. And Mr. Parks, for a 30-second response, and I'm waiting for the 30-second clock to come up. Thank you.
Thanks. The budget that was presented that triggered the election shows there's no interest by the Liberal government to control spending, and that's well documented with the numbers that came out, 12.6. I mean, our number 3 payment monthly is our deficit. If we didn't have to service that deficit, we'd have money for doing the infrastructure, the support we need. So I think you just have to look at the track record and see there's no plan to stop what they're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll stick with the next question with the riding of Thunder Bay Superior North, and the first question will be directed toward Mr. Gravelle, and then responded by all 3 candidates, and then over here as well. This question comes from the chambers, and it has to do with consultation. There is concerns that initiatives such as the Far North Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the Ontario Forest Tenure Modernization Act, to name a few. But there's concern that this legislation and policy was developed elsewhere, and while there was consultation with the North, they didn't feel that they had a role in these initiatives. What is your position to ensure when policy is developed and legislation is developed that's affected the North, local government and stakeholders are consulted and their views are expressed in said policy and legislation?
Well, I wish we had more than a minute, David, but let me focus on perhaps the Forest Tenure Modernization Act specifically. I was the minister responsible for bringing that forward, and to me this is one of the great examples of first of all, an extraordinary level of consultation all across the province, not just Northern Ontario, because obviously forest tenure goes beyond that. We were talking about how we allocate and we price and we license our crown forests. As a result of that process, and that was by working with certainly Aboriginal leaders, our communities, all communities across, what we've come up with is a new system where we now allocate our forests in a very different way. 5-6 years ago, 5 or 6 companies had complete control of the Crown Forest. Now what we have is we have an opportunity for the forest management by First Nations in Northwestern Ontario. One of the great untold stories, local forest management corporation pilot project put in place. This came about as a result of a significant consultation. I just wish there was more time to talk about the other piece of legislation, but again, there's no question the consultation is crucial and something that we take very seriously.
Thank you. Mr. Foulds?
Thank you very much for the question. I guess I'd first respond by saying one of the greatest aspects of being a municipal councillor is I've seen since 2006 how a number of municipalities and mayors have really gotten together to consult with each other and present a united front. That kind of consultation among municipal leaders has given Northern Ontario a great deal of strength in putting forward the case to the province, because certainly there was a lot of feeling that decisions were being made in Toronto regarding the North. The other aspect is, frankly, I don't see the kind of duty to consult with First Nations that should be happening. You know, at the end of the day, if Northwestern Ontario wants to move forward, not only should we be consulting with communities, we should be communicating effectively with First Nation communities, because together, united, we will be a lot stronger than if we're simply fighting with each other and rowing in different directions. So together, we can make a difference and make the case for Northern Ontario in terms of the economy to Southern Ontario.
Thank you. Mr. Parks.
Thank you. I think one of the examples is the Far North Act. That's a prime example of policy coming out of Southern Ontario to protect the North, and really, basically, we were ignored. When you talk to associations like the Ontario Prospectors or even Chief Beardy from NAN, there was no support from within those organizations for that. So if you look at the North and you look at the Ontario Prospectors and the First Nations represented by Chief Beardy, who was supporting it up north? That's one situation where we feel that economic development needs to be open, and the Conservative plan is to scrap the Far North Act. And that's been supported by various industries saying we need to be able to do what we need to do, and it's become a bureaucratic nightmare. So we are trying to cut down the bureaucracy to promote economic growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And in keeping with the format of 30 seconds.
The Far North legislation actually
It's
is
just
an
a second,
example.
sorry, Mr. Gravelle, I just want to make sure we catch up with the time.
Okay.
Pardon me. Just
Okay.
Thank you. 30 seconds, Mr. Gravelle. Thank you.
The Far North Act is an extraordinary example of unprecedented legislation, in that First Nations are literally, for the first time ever in the history of the province, in a position where they can determine how they want their lands and their territories to be used, whether it's for development or not for development. But let me just say something else in the 15 seconds I have left, which is that, you know, I probably shouldn't take this personally, but maybe I will a bit, which is that, you know, I am a Northern member. I am the Northern Voice. I have been for 19 years and proud to do so, and that's why we would make sure the consultation process involves Northern. What Andrew said about NOMA and other groups is very true.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And we'll pose the same question, and it will be to the riding of Thunder Bay Atikokan, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Wilson. Okay. 1 minute, please. One moment for 1 minute. 1 minute.
Let me preface this. At one point when we were talking before was that somehow the Conservatives and myself were looking for more government to do these things. Hardly. We're not looking for more government. We're looking for government to do its job. Again, not the job of stopping projects from going forward, but the job of consultation. It is the duty to consult is the province's job. It's not for industry. It's not for industry to do duty to consult. That's one part. Second part with the issue of the Far North Act, and I'm afraid I can talk far too much on that, but I mean, to say it was an extraordinary piece of legislation, that's exactly what I would call it too. It was extraordinary how nobody that was against it, and there were myriad people that they were not really consulted. They visited them. Right? That's what it was. There was no consultation there whatsoever, and that was one of the biggest issues. Nobody wanted that. Everybody was against it. Now they'll talk about the land use planning. Our party said, yes, get rid of the Far North Act, repeal the Far North Act, but we need the land use planning. They don't need the Far North Act for land use planning, but we have to effectively make sure it's resourced. It's not resourced now to make it work.
Thank you. Mr. Mauro?
On consultation generally, David Canfield is the mayor of Kenora and he's a member of NOMA. We struck the AMO roundtable in 2003 or shortly thereafter upon being elected in 2003. And if you talk to David Canfield and NOMA, they will tell you quite honestly that Billy, Michael, Harold, Derek, Andrew, this is one of the best things that has ever happened to municipalities because every piece of legislation that could potentially affect them flows through that round table. I've hosted some of those round tables as the PA to housing and as the minister for a very brief time to housing. So on consultation generally, it's probably, I think it's fair to say, never been better. On the Far North Act, let me add as well, I was part of that consultation. I traveled to those communities. I know how many communities were visited. If at the end of the day sometimes people aren't happy with the decision, it doesn't mean they weren't consulted. It might mean some of them weren't happy. There are a number of them who have gone forward with land use planning and years ago were actively engaged and happily engaged in the process.
Thank you. And to Mr. Wilson, 30-second response, please.
Okay. Consultation is not the same thing as listening. Yes, you said you consulted, but if they said you didn't consult, then you didn't consult. And if they told you what not to do the Far North Act and you did it, then you weren't listening. One of the things I was interested that Michael even brought up, the local forest management corporations. Again, we supported through the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce 2. All of a sudden, a month later, they were going to do all of them. And we fought and fought and fought for 3 months down at Queen's Park to stop them from doing that, so they would do 2. So after a pile of work and effort, they went back to the 2 as opposed to what they were trying to do to us from some consultation.
Thank you. We'll stick with the riding of Thunder Bay Atikokan for our next question, and begin with you, Mr. Mauro. Fill in the blank. There is the Ring of Fire, there is mining development, there is forestry opportunity, and other initiatives involving high-tech in Thunder Bay and other places like that as well. What can we do to ensure that those benefits, mining in particular though, remain in the area, and that the First Nations and the municipalities receive the full benefit of the activity that we hope takes place?
Well, I think the clear and obvious answer, and I've got a question that I think my colleague would love to be answering first, Michael Gravelle, because he has spent so much time on this particular file. When people have expressed their frustration in terms of the timing or progress related to the Ring of Fire, they're not cognizant, I don't think, always about the work that's going on behind the scenes. And a lot of the work that Michael has been doing in that ministry's capacity is in fact dealing with First Nations communities to ensure, and this twins a little bit back to the land use planning process in the Far North Act, that they're prepared, that they're ready, that they're on board. The very recent agreement that was announced within the last 6 or 7 weeks, the 9-member Matawa First Nations communities, speaks directly to a significant amount of the issues that you have raised. They would not have signed that agreement if they did not feel there was something in it for them that would take care of their communities, that would provide economic benefit for them through the development of the Ring of Fire. So I think that 9-member First Nation community piece is significant.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Okay. One of the concerns that I have over the last while has been that even when I'm out talking some of the door-to-door, is this concern that somehow the First Nations are keeping some of these development projects from happening. That's not the case. I talked to the mining companies. They said it's not the First Nations that we're having issues with. It's the government office on James Street. That's what's keeping some of these projects from moving forward. It's the hurdles, it's the hindrances, it's the hoops that people are having to jump through and through and through and not getting back to them. Because the whole culture is based on, keeping something bad from occurring. And if you approve something, something bad might happen. And that's really one of those things that's holding these things back. We have to see that development take place, but it has to be focused. We have to have everybody from the premier on down saying, we're about finding solutions to issues, not articulating problems, not coming up with reasons why not. You have to go from the top down, and that means deputy ministers and everybody else focused on finding solutions, because that's what we need to get these things moving, and that's where the small businesses will play a role in supply and services. But we got to start from the top.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for 30 seconds.
Well, it's fine to criticize the process, but I'm not sure I'm hearing any clearly articulated plan to help move it forward any quicker. The other thing I would say as well is that, and I should have fact-checked this, I'm not 100% sure on it, but up until the late 1980s or early 1990s, it's my belief that there was in fact revenue sharing for communities across the province, and then in the early 1990s it was changed to become a straight community granting formula. And this is something that's become a very difficult process over the last number of years. So I believe it used to exist, and it was changed in the early 1990s.
Thank you. The same question, and to the Thunder Bay Superior, we'll get it, Mr. Foulds, and just to repeat, it's how do we ensure that the benefits from the economic development that is to take place remain in the region, with particular emphasis upon First Nations and local municipalities as well?
Well, there's certainly been some talk already this evening about the importance to get Ring of Fire moving with investment in infrastructure, investment in energy. There's already been some discussion about revenue sharing, but I'm going to take a different slant. And the different slant that I'm going to take is we need to make sure that our young people are trained up and have the skills to take advantage of all the opportunities that are going to come forward. So not only is it about investing in this big picture stuff, strategic and thoughtful investment in energy, but it's also what are we going to do from an education perspective to make sure that we've got the right workers with the right skills to do the work that we need. And the NDP has a number of strategies to deal with this. For example, freezing tuition, making it more accessible, making loans interest-free. So the reality is we could talk about infrastructure, energy, and all that kind of stuff. That's good stuff, but let's be a little bit more thoughtful. Let's talk about education as well and make sure that our workers are ready to take on the jobs that we're poised to create.
Thank you. Mr. Gravelle.
It's me, isn't it?
It's you.
It's me.
Nope, I'm sorry, I have it as Mr. Gravelle. And you'll
Okay.
get that one.
Was it me? We're going this way now.
It's mixed up a bit, yes. We try to do it to mix
Oh,
up the
thank you very
conversation.
Well, thank you very much. Come on. I need every second of this. There's a very good reason why people are excited about the Ring of Fire, although it's really important that we try and focus on other mining opportunities as well, which are quite remarkable. But here's the thing. This is a mining development in terms of a $60 billion deposit of a material that probably is as exciting as the discovery of nickel in the Sudbury Basin. It's got a 100-year opportunity. There is no question that we are talking certainly about making sure that First Nations receive benefits, but the opportunities that will be there for municipalities and the private sector are remarkable. We're talking about 5,500 jobs. We throw that figure out, it's pretty accurate. Andrew's spoken about the trainees. We've done a great deal of that. You're quite right. We need to be ready for it. But the mining supply and services sector is extraordinarily exciting as well. That's a huge industry in northeastern Ontario, about $6 billion. It's growing here in northwestern Ontario because of the excitement of the Ring of Fire. So there's no doubt, I don't think there's one community in northwestern Ontario that will not be receiving significant benefits from the Ring of Fire project when it does get going. But it's the other mining projects as well in the region, let alone the revitalization of forestry that we should be excited about.
Thank you.
We keep going over.
You want my time?
No.
I do want. I love your time.
And now to you,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Parks.
much. I think the question is fair, and I think the reality is people at the local level, the Economic Development Corporation that the city's doing, is doing an amazing job. And I think grabbing the bull by the horns and laying the groundwork, when you look at what they're doing with New Gold and the opportunities with Premier and some of the other jobs up in the Northwest, I mean, that's not us at the province. I'd like to take credit for it, but I think it should be taken at the municipal level. And there's nothing I would want to take away from the city on what they're doing. But I think retaining those jobs will be quite easy once we have the opportunities. We got to get these mines up and running. The sooner the better. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And now to Mr. Foulds for well, wait till the clock begins. There we go. Mr. Foulds, 30-second response, please.
A number of years ago, the City of Thunder Bay commissioned a study, and that study was called the Mining Readiness Strategy. And we did that because we knew that we were poised on some greatness in terms of mining. And that mining readiness strategy talked about things like housing, talked about things like infrastructure and land use planning. So in order for municipalities to get ready for the cusp of greatness, of economic greatness, we have to be ready as municipalities. Thunder Bay's shown some leadership in developing that. The other aspect is small businesses have huge opportunity for job growth. My party actually has a tax credit to incentivize that. Thank you.
Thank you. We had proposed 6 questions for both ridings and all the candidates, and they have provided that. One candidate, due to a prior commitment, was not able to join us, so we've had a bit of time. So I have been instructed to allow for closing statements 3 minutes, not 2, for each candidate. So we'll begin with our summation, and we begin with a rotation. So we'll start with the Thunder Bay Atikokan riding for a 3-minute summation. We'll turn to you, Mr. Wilson.
Oh, okay, I thought it was B, okay. Well, then I better get going. Okay, so a summation. One of the things that we've heard, and you will hear after me then when MPP Mauro talks, is he will give you his list. We all call it the laundry list. He'll give you the laundry list of all of the accomplishments that the government has made. And there's an extensive list, but again, there's things that aren't on that list are also very important. And when you talk about things like the forest industry, well, that's because it was a recession. Or you talk about some of these, well, that's because those things happened. And again, you cannot just go through that list without taking a look at all the partners that made some of these things happen. Or the fact is that it's not one individual that does it. You know, you cannot take credit for everything and responsibility for nothing. That's not really what the job of an MPP is. That's not what we can do. take a look at the other thing is they talk about the investments. Well, there are investments, but with every investment, especially with the business crowd that is out there, you know that every investment should have a return on that investment. And sometimes those investments, whether we're talking about the $1.1 billion for the gas plants, not a very good ROI on that. A lot of those huge expenditures that are there, you can't go back and you can say, what's the return on that investment? If you're spending so much more money, if you've hired another 100,000 civil servants, 100,000 civil servants since 2009, let's calculate the ROI on that. So when we're talking with our plan about returning back to those levels, I don't think it had an ROI that was that high. I think we can do something with it. One other aspect that I did want to talk about, because I did take a look at a piece of paper that had come out, and I know that the issue of Bombardier is an important one. We all want to see Bombardier prosper. I have family that's there. Everybody in this room, I expect, has family that is there. Everybody at this table is taking a look at their own platforms, and we're talking about more subways. We're talking about more GO trains. Where are those going to be manufactured? They're going to be manufactured at Bombardier. We're all very proud of that. But when we're talking about how do you maximize the return on that investment, it's taxpayer-supported investment. How do we maximize that for Thunder Bay? How do we maximize that for the people of Ontario with supplies? One of the ways that you do that is you take a look at how can we increase the amount that is made in Canada. And the Chamber of Commerce and Mr. Mauro were very good about that a few years ago when we were taking a look at making it at 50%. 50% was a very good number and was supportable at other jurisdictions. But Premier McGuinty said, no, 25. And Bill turtled. He said, okay, 25, that's it. So 25 is what we get. And we know that a lot of that has not yielded the kind of jobs. We know from the suppliers, we know the people in there. They're not happy about the work that's going to be going to Mexico very soon as a result of that. So look at how do we get it back up. Bill did propose increasing it finally about a year and a half after the premier that scared him had left. And so he proposed that. But what happened at that time? All of a sudden, when I talked to his own Minister of Economic Development, said, are you going to support that bill? Because I did. In fact, one of the Conservative MPs called me and said, do you support it? Yes, and you should too. But the Liberals did not support that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. For a 3-minute closing remarks, Mr. Mauro.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the Chamber and Shift for the opportunity to be here tonight. I guess I'll start by just a quick response to some of that. The 25% that Harold is so quick to disparage is 100% higher than what the Conservatives had, so I'm surprised he'd be interested in spending so much time talking about Bombardier. When we were elected in 2003, that plant was down to 200 to 250 people. Mike Harris and the Conservatives in 1995 very publicly declared that we're not in the mass transit game. And about 6 plants that Bombardier owned had closed around the planet around that time. I'm not suggesting they were closing here, but who knows if they might have. We came into the 2003 election, and we made major commitments in that platform document that we were going to invest back in the mass transit game, and today there are 1,400 people working at that particular plant. I'm not sure where this economy and this community would be without those numbers. Let me just tell you a little bit about my personal experience and why I'm happy to be here with the Chamber and speak to the issues that you work so hard on. We know that small business is the backbone of the economy. I respect that greatly. I take it to work with me every day. I never forget it. I grew up in a small family business. Our corner store was open 14 and a half hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year for 9 years. My parents didn't have a pension plan. My parents didn't have sick days, and my parents didn't have holidays. And the family home was built on the back of the store. And from that experience, we very much took a work ethic that has carried us, I would say, forward for the rest of our lives. I've taken that for you to Queen's Park for the last 10, going on 11 years, and it's my hope that you'll support me and give me an opportunity to continue to do that work. I would say that if you took a step back and take an objective view at where this community was in 2003, and you take an objective view of where this community is today in 2014, I can't help but think that you could possibly come to the conclusion, no matter what political affiliation you have, that this community is far better positioned than it was in 2003 and for many years before that. The economy is relatively strong compared to most jurisdictions in Ontario, not just about Bombardier. We've diversified it as well. We haven't talked about the law school. We haven't talked about the creation of Thunder Bay Regional Research Institute, which has over 100 scientists working in it, that came with $15 million of support for that enterprise, which perhaps some of my friends to the right might consider corporate welfare. We've done our best on your behalf. We've been working very, very hard for 10 and a half years, and I've been very proud to partner with my colleague, Michael Gravelle, to work for you for the last 10 and a half years. You know, being in government is much more difficult than being a member in opposition. I felt so lucky to be elected in 2003, and I felt doubly lucky to be elected not only in 2003, but to be elected into government. It's a holiday when you're a member in opposition, but you got to do the real work and you got to deliver for your community when you're in government. I think Michael Gravelle and I have done that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And turning to the riding of Thunder Bay Superior North for your 3-minute closing remarks, Mr. Parks.
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank you for the $30 billion debt you've accumulated with us, Bill. I would like to thank the Chamber for this amazing opportunity, as I have only 115 seconds left in my 15 minutes of fame for this debate. I would like to add my final 2 cents. Firstly, we need to get to know our neighbors, all of them. The various First Nation, Métis organization, and Aboriginal women are going to be keys to solving the issues we have talked about today. Leveraging the treaty rights they have been bestowed in these treaties and upheld by the Supreme Court provide a unique way to help us secure our own destiny with partnering with the Aboriginal communities. I hear it all the time, Toronto doesn't listen to us. Well, Toronto's starting to listen to the First Nation communities, and I'm betting on the First Nations. By creating the stability and forging relations with these Aboriginal communities, we create stable environment for industry to prosper and grow. Secondly, the Ring of Fire, I would suggest, has been hijacked by special interest groups through a few First Nation bands. Government's intervention in this negotiation has brought it to a halt. When you look at the other mines in Northern Ontario, there was no government intervention with New Gold, the Victor Diamond Project, Premier, Stillwater. There's been no support from the government to lead those discussions with First Nations. Industry has been left out on their own. So we find it as a unique opportunity that they decide before an election to feel that they have to sign something with the First Nations to show that there's progress. They've agreed to continue talking, and that's all we've got. Our tax dollars are funding Toronto lawyers at the negotiating table. There's no way to ensure that what the government promises to the First Nation can truly be delivered. This hijacking is why Cliffs has left. They feel it will be 10 years before they come back. And we wonder why we feel alienated by Toronto, because we give them the keys to the resources and expect they are looking out for our best interests. When I get Wynne is either incompetent or arrogant when discussing mineral developments for Northern Ontario, I knew I had to speak my truth, and the Progressive Conservatives have allowed me that platform, and I'm grateful. Thirdly, our healthcare system is in shambles. When people are dying in ambulances because there are no beds available at the hospital, it makes me physically ill. If that was your mother, father, sister, brother, son, or daughter in that situation, how would you feel? So as human beings, we should treat everyone like our mother and do everything we can help. This should not be happening, period. So on June 12th, if you feel your life has not improved over the past decade, it may be time to send a new message of change down to Queen's Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gravelle.
Well, thank you very much, David, and thanks for moderating. Thank you to the Chamber and to Shift for sponsoring this evening, and it's been great. I thank Bill as well, because Bill outlined a number of the priorities we've been able to move forward on in terms of the economy here in Thunder Bay and Northwestern Ontario, and the great progress we've made. Debates, by the very nature, they were somewhat limiting, so we haven't talked about a lot of things that probably many of us would have liked to. Certainly, I want to reference how important the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation is to the North. $100 million fund, $100 million economic development fund. In our riding alone, over the last 10 years, we put $93 million in investments, which has leveraged about $400 million in terms of 3,000 jobs, intern positions that many of you in this room today have taken advantage of. We focused so strongly on our Northern Highways program, put $5 billion in over the last 8 to 9, 10 years, which has led to the forward-landing of the highway between Thunder Bay and Nipigon, a project obviously that is very much a personal issue for me as well, but one that both Bill and I are very proud of, and we're going to complete that project. And indeed, we're now committed to making sure that we 4-lane from border to border to border. These are priorities for us, and they are helping to build the economy. We've spoken so much tonight about the Ring of Fire for a very good reason, and as I said a number of times during this evening's discussion, that we are poised to move forward. But there are so many other opportunities in the mining sector that again are poised to move forward. We are committed to the forestry sector. The turnaround in the forestry sector has been absolutely vital. It's not the same industry it was, but to be able to get the Terrace Bay Pulp Mill reopened, up and running, to have the Dita Burla Group from India purchase it and be committed to a $250 million conversion to dissolving pulp. This is going to make this a sustainable industry and open up a number of other operations to feed that mill. Just closing, let me say this. This is actually, I believe, our last debate starting in Thunder Bay Superior North. This job means a great deal to me. I've been your MPP for 19 years. I am extremely committed to it. I love my job, and I want very much to continue to represent the interests of my constituents. I am a very strong Northern voice, and I think my constituents recognize it as such. I feel a very personal connection with my constituents after years of working so closely with so many of them. This is a great riding. There are great opportunities in Thunder Bay Superior North. There are great opportunities in Northern Ontario. I think we are blessed and lucky to have a leader like Kathleen Wynne, who has made Northern Ontario such a priority for all her ministers, for all her government members, for all of us. So certainly I'm grateful to have an opportunity to seek your support once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Foulds.
Thank you very much. Thank you for moderating this evening. Thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to Shift, my fellow candidates, for being here. And thank you to all of you for coming out this evening. I am a husband and I am a father. I was born and raised in the North. I have been a high school teacher for 17 years and a city councillor for 8. I decided to run in this election because I have a deep-seated desire to serve. I personally have had so many opportunities in my life, and I want to fight so that more people have those same opportunities. This election, you have a choice. This election is about trust. Do you want to maintain the scandals and waste of the Liberal government? In your businesses, you work extremely hard to manage your costs and your revenues. They ultimately determine the success of your business. $1.1 billion on canceled gas plants, billions more on e-health, Orange, and today we heard about the bailout of the Mars building, are glaring examples of waste and mismanagement. Minister Gravelle was a member of the cabinet that made those decisions. This election is about confidence. The confidence you have in the person you send to Queen's Park to represent your needs and fight for your causes instead of falling in line behind bad decisions that make life more difficult. As an 8-year city councillor, I have worked with you. Now, we may not always agree, but I always listen. I balance the interests and make decisions for the broader public good. This election is about our future. That is why I am running to be your MPP for the NDP. We will invest in the Ring of Fire immediately and transit for jobs at Bombardier. We will invest in infrastructure. We will reward job creators by decreasing small business taxes and those who reinvest in their businesses. As a city councillor, I believe I've built a track record you can trust. You can trust that every day I will be your MPP. You will know where I stand and I will deliver results. I have the drive and the energy to ensure respect and fairness for the North. You deserve an MPP who will be the voice of the North in the South, not the voice of the South in the North. On June 12th, I am asking for your vote, for a vision and a plan that is practical and achievable, a plan that makes sense. A vote for Andrew Foulds and the NDP. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The president of SHIFT will more properly thank the candidates just shortly, but that concludes our discussion this evening. I'd like to thank all the candidates for showing up tonight, for appearing. It takes a lot of courage to have your voice heard and to state it in front of everyone, especially when there's various opinions. So thank you for that, and thank you for my job as moderator so easy. I'll turn it over to Peter Marchi, the president of SHIFT, for a proper closure to this event. Thank you.
On behalf of the Board of Directors for SHIFT Thunder Bay's Young Professionals Network, it has been our pleasure to partner with the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce to bring you this forum. I'd like to extend a big thanks to the candidates for participating. We hope this forum has provided you with the information that will help in how you decide to vote on June the 12th. This is an important election for the Northwest as we stand on the cusp of so much opportunity. The next Ontario government will make important decisions that will guide the development of our natural resources and the creation of jobs in our region. Shaw will be airing this forum starting this Sunday and will run several times through Tuesday, June 12th. Thanks again to Net News Ledger, Shaw, Fort William Historical Park, the Victoria Inn, and Maverick Entertainment Group for their support. The bar room will remain open for another half hour to promote networking. And thank you, get out and vote, and good night.
Thanks, Peter.
I've never seen so many men ask you if you wanted to dance. They're looking for a little romance, if given half a chance.